The man who saved Britain from devastating wars and the one who destroyed an entire empire. Some became heroes of history, some became villains. One prime minister was brought down by his own parliament, another banned the slave trade. This is the era of British politics that changed the world. Robert Walpole is regarded as the first Prime Minister of Britain, although this title was not officially used at that time. He is one of the longest-serving leaders in British history. He kept Britain away from European wars and focused on the domestic economy. His famous policy was no war. He improved the tax system, strengthened the treasury, and increased the power of Parliament. Under his leadership, the British government turned into a well-organised and strong system. He is called the first and most powerful Prime Minister of Great Britain. Spencer Compton's term was very short, only a few months. He mostly appeared as a caretaker leader. His biggest achievement was that he prevented the political system from collapsing. He did not have much power, but he maintained continuity in the government. It is said that he himself did not want to remain Prime Minister for long. The Prime Minister who came after him played a more active role. Henry Pelham was a very intelligent and hard-working administrator. He strengthened Britain's financial system from the ground up. He carried out tax reforms, reduced government debt, and brought stability to the economy. During his time, public and institutional trust in the government increased. Furthermore, he made a peace treaty with France and strengthened Britain internally. His era was based more on reforms and economy rather than military actions. Thomas Pelham Hulls, known as the Duke of Newcastle, played a key role in British foreign policy and colonial affairs. During his time, Britain's global power increased. He adopted a strong military strategy against France in the 7 Years' War. As a result of this war, Britain gained control over parts of Canada and India. He constantly tried to handle both politics and war at the same time. William Pitt the Elder is counted among the greatest wartime leaders in British history. His term as Prime Minister was not very long, but before that, he remained very active as a military leader. He strengthened the British Empire on a global level. During his time, foreign policy became highly active. Under his leadership, Britain defeated France and Spain. He remained ill, which is why his term as Prime Minister was very short, but his decisions were historic. During the time of Augustus Fitzroy, Duke of Grafton, political tension between Britain and its American colonies began to rise. This was the era when resistance against taxes had already started in the American colonies. Fitzroy's government tried to handle the growing crisis, but conditions became more complicated. There was also internal political instability during his time. He proved to be a weak and indecisive leader, and soon had to leave office. Lord North was the Prime Minister during one of the most difficult periods in British history. His government faced the American War of Independence, and under his leadership, Britain lost its 13 American colonies. His policies were often criticised, and he faced strong opposition in Parliament. Despite this, he managed to keep the government running during the war. He is often remembered as the Prime Minister who lost America. Shelburne became Prime Minister after Lord North resigned. His main achievement was negotiating the peace treaty with the United States, officially ending the war. His term was short, but his decisions were historically important. He tried to rebuild relations with America and bring stability back to British politics. The Duke of Portland served as Prime Minister for a very short time. His government was weak and did not last long. However, his term is remembered because it was the first time the King and Parliament united to support a Prime Minister. He did not achieve much during his brief time in office. William Pitt the Younger was one of the youngest and most famous Prime Ministers in British history. He took office at just 24 years old. He reformed the financial system, reduced the national debt, and strengthened the economy. He also led Britain during the French Revolutionary Wars and stood firm against Napoleon. His leadership was strong, determined, and highly respected. Addington took over after Pitt's first resignation. He made peace with France, but his government was seen as weak and ineffective. He lacked the strong leadership of his predecessor. His time in office was not very successful, and he was soon replaced. Grenville is remembered for one of the greatest achievements in British history, the abolition of the slave trade in 1807. He passed the Slave Trade Act, which made it illegal to trade slaves in the British Empire. This was a historic step toward human rights and justice. His government was short-lived, but this one act made him unforgettable. Portland returned as Prime Minister for a second time. However, his government faced internal divisions and conflicts. He was not able to control his own cabinet, and his health was also failing. He resigned after 2 years, and his second term was much weaker than the first. Spencer Perceval is a tragic figure in British political history. He was the only British Prime Minister ever to be assassinated. He was shot in the lobby of the House of Commons. His government was focused on the economy and the war against Napoleon. His death was a shock to the nation. Lord Liverpool led Britain during the final years of the Napoleonic Wars and the post-war period. He oversaw the defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo and brought peace to Europe. He also dealt with the economic problems that followed the war. His long term brought stability and recovery to Britain after years of conflict. George Canning served as Prime Minister for only a few months, but he left a strong mark. He was a brilliant diplomat and a master of foreign policy. He supported independence movements in Latin America and worked to protect British interests around the world. He died suddenly in office, cutting short a promising leadership. Viscount Goderic took over after Canning's death, but his term was weak and unstable. He lacked control over his cabinet and struggled to manage the government. His time in office was short and often remembered as a failure. He resigned after just a few months. Duke of Wellington was a national hero, famous for defeating Napoleon at Waterloo. As Prime Minister, he was cautious and conservative. His biggest achievement was passing the Catholic Relief Act of 1829, which gave Catholics more rights. However, he opposed parliamentary reform and lost public support. Earl Grey is best known for the Great Reform Act of 1832, which changed the British electoral system. He believed in reform and justice. His government reduced corruption and gave more people the right to vote. His name is still remembered today, even through the famous Earl Grey tea. Viscount Melbourne served 2 terms as Prime Minister. He was a close advisor and friend to the young Queen Victoria. His government focused on moderate reforms and stability. He guided the young Queen through the early years of her reign and helped shape the modern constitutional monarchy. Sir Robert Peel is one of the most important Prime Ministers in British history. He founded the modern police force, known as Bobbies after his name. He also introduced free trade policies and repealed the Corn Laws, which lowered food prices. His decisions were brave but split his own party. Lord John Russell was a strong advocate for reform. He worked to expand education and improve working conditions. He also promoted religious tolerance and freedom. His government introduced important social reforms that helped the poor and working class. Earl of Derby served 3 separate terms as Prime Minister. He was a skilled politician and a strong leader. His governments focused on foreign affairs and maintaining stability. He worked with Disraeli to introduce reforms while keeping the Conservative Party united. Earl of Aberdeen led Britain during the Crimean War. His government faced serious criticism for poor military management. The war exposed weaknesses in the British Army and government. He resigned under pressure, but his efforts to maintain peace and diplomacy were still respected. Viscount Palmerston was a popular and energetic leader. He dominated British foreign policy for many years. He projected British power confidently around the world. His strong leadership made him a favourite among the public. He was the last Prime Minister to serve while still active in the House of Commons. Benjamin Disraeli was a brilliant politician, writer, and the only Prime Minister of Jewish heritage. He expanded the British Empire and made Queen Victoria the Empress of India. His government introduced social reforms and strengthened Britain's position in Europe. He is remembered as one of the most colourful and influential leaders. William Ewart Gladstone was the great rival of Disraeli. He was a deeply moral and reform-minded leader. He served 4 terms as Prime Minister. He introduced education reforms, voting rights for more people, and worked for peace in Ireland. His speeches and ideas inspired millions. Earl of Rosebery served a short term as Prime Minister. He was passionate about the British Empire and foreign affairs. His government lacked unity and struggled with internal problems. He resigned after about a year and never returned to power. Marquess of Salisbury served 3 separate terms as Prime Minister. He was a skilled diplomat and led Britain during the height of the Empire. His government focused on foreign policy, imperial expansion, and avoiding European wars. He was the last Prime Minister to serve from the House of Lords. Arthur Balfour became Prime Minister after his uncle, Lord Salisbury, retired. He was a calm and intelligent leader. His most famous achievement was the Balfour Declaration of 1917, which supported a Jewish homeland in Palestine. However, his time as Prime Minister was difficult. His government faced problems with education and trade. He resigned after losing support in Parliament. Henry Campbell Bannerman was a warm and popular leader. He was the first Prime Minister to be officially called Prime Minister in government documents. His government introduced pensions for the elderly and gave more power to trade unions. He was a strong supporter of peace and reduced military spending. He died suddenly while still in office. Herbert Asquith was a brilliant lawyer and a skilled politician. He led Britain through the early years of the First World War. His government introduced the People's Budget, which taxed the rich to fund social reforms. He also reduced the power of the House of Lords. However, his leadership during the war was criticised. He was replaced by Lloyd George in 1916. David Lloyd George was one of the most famous and energetic prime ministers in British history. He led Britain to victory in the First World War. He was a great speaker and a strong leader. He introduced reforms like better housing and healthcare. He also gave more voting rights to women. However, his government faced scandals and lost support after the war. Andrew Bonar Law served as Prime Minister for only a few months. He was a quiet and hard-working leader. His main achievement was negotiating peace with the Irish Republicans. He also focused on economic recovery after the war. He resigned due to poor health and died soon after. Stanley Baldwin served 3 separate terms as Prime Minister. He was a calm, steady leader who tried to keep Britain stable during difficult times. He dealt with the general strike of 1926. He also handled the abdication crisis of King Edward VIII. His government introduced reforms in education and housing. He was respected as an honest and trustworthy leader. Ramsay MacDonald was the first Labour Prime Minister of Britain. He served 2 separate terms. His government focused on social welfare and employment. He tried to reduce poverty and improve working conditions. However, his decision to form a coalition government during the Great Depression angered many in his own party. He remains a controversial but historic figure. Neville Chamberlain is most remembered for his policy of appeasement toward Hitler. He believed that peace could be maintained through negotiation. He signed the Munich Agreement in 1938, hoping to avoid war. However, when Germany invaded Poland in 1939, Britain declared war. He resigned in 1940 after criticism of his wartime leadership. Winston Churchill is considered one of the greatest prime ministers in British history. He led Britain through the darkest days of the Second World War. His powerful speeches inspired the British people to never surrender. He worked closely with the United States and the Soviet Union to defeat Nazi Germany. He was a brilliant leader, writer, and orator. He is remembered as the man who saved Britain. Clement Attlee was one of the most transformative prime ministers in British history. He led the Labour Party to a landslide victory after the Second World War. His government created the National Health Service, NHS, which provided free healthcare to all. He also nationalised major industries and expanded the welfare state. He is remembered as a quiet but highly effective leader. Winston Churchill returned as Prime Minister for a second term. He was older now, but still a powerful symbol of British strength. His government focused on maintaining peace during the early Cold War years. He also worked to strengthen the relationship with the United States. However, his second term was less eventful than his first. Anthony Eden was a handsome and popular leader. He took over from Churchill with high expectations. However, his term was destroyed by the Suez Crisis of 1956. Britain invaded Egypt in a failed attempt to control the Suez Canal. The United States opposed the invasion, and Eden was forced to resign. His reputation never recovered. Harold Macmillan was a calm and confident leader. He helped Britain recover from the Suez Crisis. His government focused on the economy and housing. He famously said that the British people had never had it so good. He also played a key role in nuclear disarmament talks. He resigned due to health issues in 1963. Alec Douglas Home became Prime Minister after Macmillan resigned. He was an aristocrat and a skilled diplomat. However, his term was short and he struggled to connect with the public. He lost the 1964 election to Harold Wilson. He later returned to politics as a respected Foreign Secretary. Harold Wilson was a clever and popular Labour leader. He served 2 separate terms as Prime Minister. His government introduced social reforms, including the legalisation of abortion and homosexuality. He also expanded education and the welfare state. He handled the economic challenges of the 1960s and 1970s. He resigned suddenly in 1976. Edward Heath led Britain into the European Economic Community, the predecessor of the European Union. He also faced serious economic problems and labour strikes. His government struggled with inflation and unemployment. He lost the 1974 election to Wilson and never returned to power. Harold Wilson returned for a second term. He continued to deal with economic difficulties and labour unrest. He also worked on devolution plans for Scotland and Wales. He resigned suddenly in 1976, surprising everyone. James Callaghan became Prime Minister after Wilson resigned. He faced the severe economic crisis of the late 1970s, known as the Winter of Discontent. Labour strikes and inflation caused widespread anger. He lost the 1979 election to Margaret Thatcher, ending the post-war political consensus. Margaret Thatcher was the first female Prime Minister of Britain. She was a bold and controversial leader. She introduced free market policies and reduced the power of trade unions. She privatised many state-owned industries. She also led Britain to victory in the Falklands War. Her strong leadership style earned her the nickname the Iron Lady. She remains one of the most influential prime ministers in British history. John Major took over after Thatcher's resignation. He was a calm and moderate leader. His government focused on economic recovery and peace in Northern Ireland. He also played a key role in the Gulf War. However, his government was damaged by internal Conservative Party conflicts. He lost the 1997 election to Tony Blair in a landslide defeat. Tony Blair was one of the most popular and successful Labour prime ministers. He won 3 consecutive elections. His government introduced many social reforms, including the minimum wage and devolution for Scotland and Wales. He also played a major role in the Northern Ireland peace process. However, his decision to join the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003 was highly controversial. His reputation suffered as a result. Gordon Brown became Prime Minister after Blair resigned. He was a serious and hard-working leader. He faced the global financial crisis of 2008 and took steps to prevent a collapse of the banking system. He also promoted international cooperation. However, his government struggled with declining public support. He lost the 2010 election and resigned. David Cameron became Prime Minister as the leader of a coalition government. He focused on reducing the budget deficit and cutting public spending. He also legalised same-sex marriage in 2013. However, his biggest challenge came in 2016 when he called a referendum on Britain's membership in the European Union. The UK voted to leave the EU and Cameron resigned the next day. Theresa May became Prime Minister after Cameron's resignation. She was the second female Prime Minister of Britain. Her main task was to negotiate Britain's exit from the European Union. She worked hard to reach a deal, but her plan was rejected by Parliament multiple times. Facing constant opposition, she resigned in 2019. Boris Johnson was a charismatic and controversial leader. He led the Conservative Party to a landslide victory in the 2019 election. He finally delivered Britain's exit from the European Union. He also led the country through the COVID-19 pandemic. However, his government faced many scandals, including parties held during lockdown. He resigned in 2022 after losing the support of his party. Liz Truss served as Prime Minister for only 49 days, the shortest term in British history. She announced a series of tax cuts that caused economic chaos and market turmoil. Her policies were quickly reversed, and she was forced to resign. Her term is remembered as one of the most disastrous in modern British politics. Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister after Liz Truss resigned. He was the first British Prime Minister of Indian heritage. He focused on stabilising the economy and reducing inflation. He also worked on energy security and immigration issues. However, his government faced ongoing challenges and declining public confidence. Keir Starmer is the current Prime Minister of Britain. He led the Labour Party to victory in the 2024 election. He is a former lawyer and human rights advocate. His government focuses on economic reform, healthcare, and climate change. He also pledged to restore public trust in government. He continues to lead the country through ongoing national and global challenges.